Like, he was doing things that were just badass.
That was one of the coolest moments of my life.
I was really scared, but knowing that Dan had the gun, I did have the rifle, like, we would be okay.
All right, guys, welcome to today's show. And on the show with me today, I am joined by Matt Campbell. And Matt has been kind of a lifelong hunter, and an avid bow hunter. He runs Split Brow Productions, and we're just going to chat about all sorts of different hunting stories and topics. And so thanks for joining me, Matt.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Why don't you start out by just sharing a little bit about yourself, hunting history with the listeners, and then, that way they can get more familiar with you.
Okay, yeah, for sure. I started getting interested in hunting here in Michigan from a super early age, back as far as I can remember, like 5, 6 years old on. Was always just really, fascinated with deer and all that kind of stuff. Would tag along with my dad. He was kind of the quintessential Michigan gun hunter. First 3 days of gun season here in Michigan, whether he kills 1 buck, 2 bucks, or no deer, that's his deer season. And which is fine, but he always did a really good job of taking me along and kind of entertaining how crazy I got to be about hunting. He kind of helped me along with that too. So, but yeah, I started bow hunting at 12 years old, the first year that I could here in Michigan, and really never looked back. I have shot a few deer with a firearm, but I think it's been 16 years since I've shot a buck with a firearm. It's been strictly bow since then. So I kind of took off with that and never looked back.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's pretty similar to my story, except I was just on the other side of Lake Michigan growing up in central Wisconsin.
Yep.
Where you're at in Michigan, are you like mainly farmland? Are you getting close to like the Northwoods?
We are at what I would call the northern edge of the agricultural. Southern Michigan is, starting at the state line north to about, halfway north in the lower peninsula, I would say is very similar. Probably, I'm going to say 60% to 70% farm fields with mixed woodlots and creek and river drainages that connect, all that kind of stuff. So, it's kind of a bow hunter's paradise, really, because it's not the big wood setting where you're trying hard to figure them out. The deer are usually visible, and we have a strong deer population here. Put it that way. We have a lot of does, and I think that kind of contributed to making me into the hunter that I am today. I had a lot of practice growing up. Put it that way.
Did you guys spotlight there? I mean, obviously not for hunting, but did you grow up like driving around in a truck with a spotlight, looking at deer at night?
We did. I can remember being super young with my dad and one of his buddies, cruising around the back roads, shining deer. And that was a pretty typical thing. A lot of people did it. It's legal until I think 11 p.m.
Oh, okay.
And then after that, you can't shine. I don't do it anymore. I've kind of soured on it just because once I got older and figured out what a lot of people use that for, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was definitely cool, especially Michigan has gotten incrementally better each year with, the size of the bucks and that type of thing. And the culture has changed a little bit, but back then a big buck was a real rarity. So if you went out with a spotlight, I mean, you could see some of the big ones that were there, you were going to see them. And that was always really cool.
Yeah. We grew up doing that, and it was like every night we'd go out shining. We'd have the battery powered. Well, it never was battery powered to start. It was always the plug-in, it would plug into the 12 volt, and they'd make like million candle power spotlights, and you'd light up an entire field. But that was like the coolest thing. I think that contributed a lot to me getting excited about hunting, because I'm like, holy cow, you go out with a spotlight and you might see 200 deer in one night. And sitting in the woods, that might take 5 years to see 200 deer. And so I was like, man, these things are all over.
I can remember a couple times in high school once I had a really close knit group of buddies, 6 or 7 of us, and we still are close to this day. And when we were like 16, 17, could first drive, we'd pile in this minivan that my one buddy had, and we'd go shine. And I can remember one night we were on a back road out in the middle of nowhere, and somehow that spotlight blew a fuse in the van. We had no dash lights, no interior lights.
Oh no.
had to limp at home, but yeah, we had some good times doing that. There was always like two really big alfalfa fields that were like guaranteed to be just full of deer,
Yep.
So we'd hit those pretty often.
Yeah,
but yeah, we've kind of shied away from that as we've gotten older.
I mean, living in Missouri, you can't do it here. I haven't, aside from one time in Michigan, actually central Michigan, I went up to visit a buddy, and he's like, dude, let's go out. Like, this is what I grew up doing. And I was like, sweet. Like, I haven't shined for deer in probably 10 to 15 years. And so we cruise out, and like the first 3 fields we hit, it wasn't even dark yet. We were just driving and looking, and it was all bean fields, and there were so many deer. And then all of a sudden we get to this one field. He's like, just wait. If the big buck's out here, like, your jaw's going to drop. Sure enough, we pull up, and there's probably 15 to 20 does and a 180 inch buck. And I'm just like, are you kidding me right now? I'm like, dude, I didn't know you had deer like that here. He's like, well, I mean,
yeah,
don't, like, that's very
I was going to say
rare.
that's very rare in our area.
But he started, I mean, we took pictures and videos of it, and we sent it to all his buddies, and he's like, guys, I found the big one. And one guy's like, yeah, I hunt right next to that property. Like, he's mine this year.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah,
it was
I've
fun.
kind of heard you talk a few times about, the average antler size where you're at now in Missouri. And I think I'm pretty similar here. Like,
yeah,
it seems like that 110 to 130 range is a typical nice buck. And then once every couple of years, we'll get one in the 140, 150 range.
Yeah,
that's running around. But that's pretty similar to where you're at then.
Yeah, it's very similar. I mean, we'll get a couple like in the 150s. I did see probably a 180. Was it 2 years ago now during bow season? Saw it one time. Came in with another buck, but it was 350 yards away. I was sitting there with my bow, and I just look out in the field, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, that's the biggest buck I've ever seen while hunting. It's not even close. And so I grab my binos, and I'm looking at it, and it's just like working its way probably 5 yards from the road, right across this bean field. And I'm like, it's like probably November 4th. And I grab, I've got my call and my antlers, and I just click them together a little bit. And I'm like, all right, maybe I'll see if that gets his attention. Well, they get over to like the right side of the field, and it's got fog in it. And I'm like looking at him, and I'm like, man, it's hard to see him now. All of a sudden I see the front deer, which at first I thought was a young doe because of like the body difference. It was night and day. I mean, it looked like a doe and a fawn. Yeah. Like, that's how different they were. And I look, and here's this buck running up the fence line right towards me. And I'm like, where did that buck come from? And then I put 2 and 2 together. It was a monster, and then this buck walking together.
Yeah.
And I'm like watching this one, and I'm like, oh man, that other one's probably coming in ready to fight too. Look back, gone. Never saw him again. Never heard about him again. The only thing I know is that one of the neighbors has pictures of him, and
oh man,
nobody's killed him. Nobody's found sheds, but
it's
biggest buck I've ever seen.
It's shocking for someone like me, like when I started to go out of state, to see a true mature buck and what that actually looks like especially in Kansas last year. Like, I've hunted Missouri a couple times, in northern Missouri, saw some nice deer, but I never got to see a true giant like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Kansas last year, I was out there mid-November, so it was lockdown, and we saw bucks midday just either zombie walking looking for a doe or with a doe, right? And I had killed my buck, and we were headed to the processor midday the next day. And we came over this hill, and probably a half a mile up, and we're in cattle country. It's like prairie grass and cattle pastures.
Yep.
We crest this hill in the truck, and I didn't even say anything at first because it didn't even register in my brain what it was in the road up there. and I kind of like started to stammer and talk to the guy next to me. I'm like, is that a steer? What is in the road up there? And it was a buck. And the guy's like, get up there, let's see it. And it was just kind of paralleling a creek bed at like 12:30 in the afternoon, all by himself, probably a mid 160s 10-pointer, just in that fog that they get in the middle of the rut when they're in between does. He didn't care. He was just going A to B looking for a doe. But I have never seen the body shape. Like, he literally was shaped like a steer. Just that super deep chest. The neck was enormous. And I kind of opened my eyes to what a true mature buck actually looks like. I'm used to hunting 3-year-olds here in Michigan, you know, so.
Yeah, I've only hunted Kansas one time, and it was life-changing. I was like, man, at some point we've got to have land out here. A buddy of mine's actually looking at 320 acres out there, and I've seen the deer that have come off that property, and I'm like, please get it, please get it. Like, what do I need to go bring a case of beer to somebody to help sweeten the deal? What's going on?
It's a special place, that's for sure. Like, when we took our deer to the processor, a buddy of mine and I killed on the same night, and then the next day we took both of our bucks to the processor, and the racks hanging on you know, that were waiting to be picked up. I'm like, holy cow. I mean, ours were nice, but there were some giants there, and it's just like an everyday thing to them out there. Like, they don't even really, doesn't even move the needle out there unless it's like over 170 of the locals, you know. So.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of how it was growing up in Wisconsin. Like, I grew up right next to Buffalo County, Wisconsin, which is like known for monster bucks. And it seemed like every year we'd have someone we knew that would send us a picture of like a 17-point buck up to like a 25-point buck, going anywhere from like 170s to the low 200s. And it's like, how, like, where are these guys hunting? And Wisconsin's known for big bucks, but there's so many small bucks shot for every big buck.
Yeah.
Like, the deer numbers are just so high that obviously like, there's going to be more big bucks as well.
I've always been really almost puzzled, I guess, and I'd like to hear your opinion on it, because like you said, Wisconsin and Michigan are very comparable in the overall number of hunters.
Yep.
I mean, we're right in the top 5 every year for hunters, right? And you can use centerfire rifles in Wisconsin, right?
Yeah.
So that's the same as Michigan. But we do not pump out the bucks like Wisconsin does here. And the main thing that I've always thought is the terrain, because it is so much more rugged by Buffalo County. There's so much more places for them to actually hide from those hunters.
Yep.
Is that maybe what you think contributes to it?
Yeah, I think like Buffalo County, Wisconsin it's an amazing mix of country out there. I mean, you'll have rolling hills, just like acres and acres of corn. Then you'll have cliff country, or they call it bluff country down there. And the bluff country, I mean, it's 100-foot cliffs bordering the Mississippi River. And so you have all of that. That's tough terrain. And then you have deep swamps all along the Mississippi River. And Buffalo County sits right on it's right on the edge of the state. And so you get all of that different terrain, and it makes it tough as a hunter. Like, there's some spots that are almost inaccessible. Like, you could go out in those swamps and probably find some 150s, 160s every year.
Yeah.
Because nobody gets back there. I mean, you could take one step from solid ground, and the next thing you're in like thigh deep black dirt, like slush,
muck.
And so, I mean, you could probably get away with it in the winter when it's all frozen and stuff, but then you're still having to cross some creeks. That country is just crazy. And
maybe I guess with the mineral rich soil along the Mississippi, maybe it has something to do with it too. But it's always just kind of puzzled me, like, what is Michigan doing so wrong? Because I know you can use rifles in Wisconsin. Like, how are the bucks just so much bigger on average over there? But.
Well, it's crazy because like there's so many hunters, which is I think the reason that we typically lead the country in Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young entries. Like, Wisconsin's always up there in the top 1, 2, or 3. But I really think part of it's the soil, like you were saying. There's so much food everywhere you look. There's food. Like the deer can live in almost any square mile in Wisconsin and have plenty of food to grow a big rack. But yeah, other than that, I really don't know, because like you look at Minnesota, like Minnesota, Michigan, and Wisconsin are very similar, and they're close. I mean, Minnesota's just on the other side of the border or on the other side of the river, but they're just not pumping out the same type of numbers. And
I think I'm going to get
a
a dose. I'm going to get a dose of the bluff country on the other side of the river in Iowa this year.
Oh,
I've got an Iowa muzzleloader tag for Unit 9 tucked up in that northeast corner.
Oh,
I think it's very similar. Looking at the maps, it's pretty rugged.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to get a crash course in bluff country hunting this December. So
yeah, I would love to. I mean, that whole strip, Iowa, even Illinois, and it seems like lately a ton of good stuff's coming out of Ohio. I've had a couple people reach out from Ohio and they're like, dude, the bucks here are insane. And I'm like, I just haven't spent a lot of time in Ohio to know what the country's like, what the terrain's like. But
I've hunted several states, and I will say that Southeast Ohio and the big woods and the hill country was the hardest for me to kind of get my head around how to hunt it.
Oh,
Hunted down there for 3 years, and it kicked my butt. I won't sugarcoat it or try to act like I'm some great hunter. It was very, very tough. I had to sort of dive into how they relate to those terrain features, saddles, bedding points, all that stuff. And once I learned a little more about that third season, I got into a little more deer and got a little closer. But the bucks are there. But for a flatland farm country bow hunter like I grew up, it was like being dropped on the moon, man. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you get into like some serious elevation and terrain changes, things go sideways in a hurry, or you just realize how out of shape you are. I can't tell you how many times I've been like hiking up a mountain and I'm like, I don't even have meat in my pack. Like I'm as light as I can be right now, and I am just sucking wind.
Yeah.
What's been your favorite type of place to hunt, I guess? Are you big on edges, woods, fields? What do you like to hunt?
I definitely feel most comfortable in like say like if I'm going somewhere for a 5 to 7 day hunt, if it's mixed agriculture, I feel like I can quickly sort of figure out what the deer are doing. I'm definitely most comfortable with that. But I will say that going to Kansas last year, like I said, it was prairie grass and cattle pasture country.
Yep.
And I mean, you might have 3 trees big enough for a tree stand in a 1 mile square. And when we first got there, I'm like, we're going to bow hunt this. Like, what are we doing here, guys? But once I started to figure that out, that was a ton of fun because everything is so visible. If the deer are there, you're going to see them. Yep. And I like that. I like being able to see what they're doing and adjust. And the last probably 3 to 5 years, I've really transitioned to more mobile hang and hunt style. And both my bucks last year were killed that way, my Michigan deer and my Kansas deer. So
nice.
It is better, or I do prefer now being able to see and make a quick adjustment like that. So yeah, Kansas so far, I would have to say is my favorite. I'm had good success there last year, and I'm headed back this fall. So
yeah,
it was a blast.
I'm so torn between being able to see and just the element of surprise. I've got one property. I went and hunted it last night, and they just finished cutting all the corn probably 3 days ago. And so I'm sitting over a bean field. The neighbors is all corn, and the deer just run up that cornfield, cross at the 4-way crossing on the fence, and then they're right in front of me. And I love sitting there because, I can see probably a total of 500 acres and see where the deer are, like if they're out. So to go out and not see deer is very rare.
Yeah.
On the flip side, here at the spot that I'm recording from, it's 20 acres, thick woods, but there's something about just sitting in the woods and hearing that crunch. And like that one was not a squirrel. The last 400 have been squirrels, but this one was big. And
I always loved and here in Michigan, we get those early November hard frost, high pressure mornings, and that different cadence, you can tell it's a buck. Like you can tell it's a buck coming. Like does will walk lightly and, you know, they'll hesitate, but you get those early November bucks and you can just hear that and your heart rate just jumps. I love that, being able to hear them coming through the woods like that.
I went and sat last night and that exact thing happened to me. I'm hunting a field edge right above the fence line. I'm in the first tree on the edge of the woods and I sat all night. I mean, I got out there pretty late, but sat, didn't see much. And I look at my phone and shooting light last night was 5:11. And so I was like, all right,
Okay.
it's 5:11. I grab my camera off my camera arm, put it in my bag, go to get my camera arm off the tree. And I hear that. And I'm just like, that's a buck. I know that's a buck. And I just wait. And I'm like looking back in the woods and all of a sudden I see it come through and it turns broadside at 5 yards. And at this point, because it's in the woods and it's shooting like right at shooting light, I can't tell which deer it is yet. All I can see is the body. And I'm like, I just see a sway in the back and I'm like, oh no, that's one of the two. It's one of the two. I don't know which one yet. And I mean, it just stands there for like a good minute broadside at 5 yards. I've got a perfect window in the trees and I'm like, why couldn't this have been like 3 minutes ago, you know?
Yeah.
And then it turns, hops the fence right into the bean field. Now it's at like probably 10 yards broadside, plain as day. And I could see that it was one of my two bucks that I want to shoot this year. And I never even picked up my bow. I just stood there and just admired it. I'm like, I cannot believe this happened 2 minutes after legal shooting light was up.
Oh, it was just after legal.
Oh yeah. I mean, literally like just after. And I'm like, it was a cool encounter. Don't get me wrong, but there are some people that would be like, oh, I would have shot it anyway, but I can't bring myself to break the rules when it comes to that type of stuff for a couple different reasons. One, I just don't think it's ethical. Two, I don't want to have to lie about the story now every time I share it, you know, like if I had to hide.
Now that you're making this your livelihood, you don't want that stain early on. You know what I mean? You can't be doing that.
No, I'm like, man, it's kind of a waste. It's a waste of a good story if you have to hide details.
Yeah.
And I would much rather let it go and have this as part of the story if I shoot him later on in the year. And so it was good information though. I know he's crossing right underneath my stand. And
were you able to make it out clean?
Yeah,
like
I did. So I just waited. I watched him and he got out into the field and he kind of stopped. And I think he could tell something was up. He couldn't quite figure out what, but he just went from like hopping the fence and standing there to like a brisk walk, not really a trot. But I just watched him and I could see his silhouette all the way down the field until he got to the road, which is like 350 yards. And so then I started packing my stuff up and I climbed down.
Yeah.
But
and
it was fun
with the camera as well. You lose camera light about 10 minutes before legal anyways too.
Well, and I've never filmed. I've filmed, let me think. I filmed one coyote. Like I shot a coyote while coyote hunting.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing I've ever filmed. And I keep saying like, man, I'm going to get into filming. Yeah. I got a couple Tacticams. I got this like real small Sony and got a camera arm. And I'm like, man, I'm going to do all this. And then I keep,
it's a lot of work.
Man. I keep messing up. Like I forgot my adapter that goes on the bottom of the camera that clips into the camera arm.
Yeah.
Forgot that my first hunt of the year. And so I didn't have anything to film. Shot a doe like right under my stand. I'm like, this is ridiculous.
So last year in Kansas, the second morning I was there, I have the fourth arrow triple arm. The base goes to the tree and then you drop that in.
Yep.
So I get to my stand in the dark and I don't have the base. I don't know how I took it out of my backpack or what I did. So I somehow, I don't remember if it was from my mobile sticks or what, but I had a ratchet strap in my backpack.
Yep.
And I rigged that thing to the tree. Like I took the first section and I was able to ratchet it down so tight that it was functional. And luckily nothing came by close that morning, but I think I could have made it work. But I took a couple pictures. It was pretty funny. I sent them to Tyler, the guy that I do the channel with. I'm like, well, I'm hunting this morning, but I don't know how this is going to work out.
Yep.
But it gets to be a lot of gear. It really does, especially when I'm mobile and I have my sticks, my saddle, my platform, and then all the stuff for self-filming.
What saddle are you running?
I'm using Latitude Outdoors this year. They're based here in Michigan in Grand Rapids. This is my first year using Latitude, but this is my 18th season saddle hunting.
Dang.
I ditched the tree stands in 2004, and I've been strictly saddle since then. Even the last couple gun bucks that I killed, the last one was 2006. I killed that gun buck out of a tree saddle as well.
Nice. What are some pointers? I don't have one. I've got a couple buddies who have got them. Like the main properties that I hunt, I have so many tree stands up. I can just pick which one I want to sit in. But I would like to try to get into public land hunting because I hear story after story about big bucks being shot out here on public, and the trees just aren't conducive for a climber at all. I did it one time in a climber, hated it, thought I was going to die, and I said never again.
I've done 2 sits in a climber, and that's it. I have a brand new Summit with 2 sits in it that's hanging in my garage, like brand new.
That's awesome.
probably never use it again. I should sell it. But with the tree saddle, the type of tree that you can sit in is so, like, it's unlimited. It really is. So actually a hunt from Missouri that comes to mind, in 2015, I had a lease near Kirksville in northern Missouri. Yeah. And I didn't want to leave any stands there, 10 hours away. I didn't want them get down there and have them stolen and all that stuff. So I'm like, okay, that was the first year that I really went mobile with my sticks. I had the Muddy Pros, the smaller with the rope cleats on them. And I bounced around that farm a little bit and actually ended up killing my buck out of an Osage orange tree that I was probably 11 feet to where my boots were. And I'll bet that tree, like at that time, I didn't have a platform yet. Nobody was really making the saddle platform. So I was using screw-in pegs. Mm-hmm. And when I was screwing them in that morning, I was actually worried that they were going to hit going through the tree. That's how thin that thing was. It was probably, 5-6 inch diameter max where I was tied off.
Oh my gosh.
But so that's how versatile they are. I was literally in a glorified bush when I killed that deer, and I shot that deer at 12 yards. It was November 12th, and he was defending a doe in a bedding area against some other bucks, and she led him right by the tree at 12 yards. And that deer was so, like I mentioned before, that like brain fog that they get in the rut. I shot him, and he made a little half moon shape and stopped at like 20 yards. And I knew that I 10 ringed him, right? I could see blood just pouring out of him. And I'm like, what? He was standing for 30 seconds without tipping over. So I knocked another arrow, and he starts getting wobbly, and that deer died at the base of my tree, almost touching the tree. It was wild. It was one of them. It was like 137 inch 10 point. It was a really nice buck, but just an unbelievably cool hunt, how it all played out. But yeah, those deer never had a clue I was there 11 feet off the ground because that tree had so much cover. And that's something that I've actually started doing more and more in the last couple of years. I used to have it pre-programmed in my head. I have to be 25 feet no matter what, or these deer are going to see me. Have to be high. And I think I was hurting myself more than helping myself because I would out-climb the cover. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So now I'll get to that 15 to 18 feet a lot of hunts, stay where I have more cover, and I seem to be having more success. My Kansas buck last year, same thing. It was Osage orange tree, just a little bit bigger than that, and I was maybe 12 feet.
Yeah, I think my boots are at 13 feet in my main stand, and I picked that spot because I was walking and I look, and there was just this perfect window, and all I saw was a straight trunk. Underneath is like a full, probably 120 degree fan of branches, and then above it's the same thing. And my buddy's like, do you stand up a lot when you hunt? And I'm like, I can't. I'm like, I have so much cover, like here.
Just right over your head.
Like I can stand up and see probably 50 yards out, but I lose visibility of the next 300 yards out to the road. And so I'm like, I sit for a while. I like to stand and turn, but I keep telling myself every year I'm gonna get into saddle hunting, and like this year it didn't happen, and I'm kind of well, it could still happen. I just need to.
There is a learning curve. There is a learning curve. I would actually, for someone who's never done it, I would recommend against doing it mid-season, just because the setup is so different. Like, I've fine-tuned my setup so much over the last 18 years that everything's just second nature now. Yeah. But to think about somebody just coming in, it would be so foreign. You know what I mean? But yeah, if you do it, I would get into it in the spring. And take the summer and practice. Shooting is different. It alters your form a little bit. Yeah. I had one buddy especially that the first year he used it, he really struggled shooting out of it at deer. So there is a little bit of a learning curve there, but and they aren't for everybody. Everybody's body is a little bit different too. Like I'm a fairly short guy, you know, a little chubbier, but some guys, and for whatever reason, it seems like the tall, skinny guys have trouble getting comfortable in them, which I don't understand. You'd think it'd be the opposite, but I guess it's probably, you know, they're too bony, I guess, but yeah. And companies are getting a lot better. Like Latitude, for example, I'm using the classic, they call it, just a one panel, you know, that's why it's called that. It's the classic saddle design. Yep. They also set me up with the Method, they call it, which is the 2-panel, if you've seen those before. And then they make a Method XL, which I sat in the XL and it was way big on me, and I'm not a skinny guy. So I would say in the 300-pound range, a guy could probably be comfortable in that Method XL. So, you just, and a lot of these companies are doing demo days. I would really recommend that people do that, actually sit in one, because as much as I love Latitude as a brand, their ownership is awesome. The product is awesome. Some guy's body type might not agree with it. It's just where it hits your hips and your bone structure. So it really is a custom thing.
Yeah.
It's been invaluable to me.
I've been using just a rock climbing harness when I hang my stands. Like that's been kind of my go-to. I have hands free. I can just
with a lineman belt.
Yep. And so I've been doing that for years now. And even when I was doing that, I didn't even know about saddle hunting. And then all of a sudden I was like listening to podcasts, and it seemed like every couple weeks I was hearing saddle. Start looking it up, and I'm like, dang, this is cool. Like I've been doing that, but I'm just like, I never even thought to do it while I hunted. I only used it so I had hands free when I was hanging stands. And now the more I think about it, I'm like, man, it would be perfect. And even if I did try to get into it, like this season, I've got a spot right behind my house where it's like I could just climb the tree and sit all day long. I'll see 20 deer. We've got an orchard literally right behind the house. I've got my bow range that goes straight down the row of the orchard. And so I've got like a buck decoy, and then I've got like 3 or 4 targets behind that. I'll open the garage door on the back. It's like a mechanical garage door, you know, hit the button and it goes up, and here's my buck decoy, and then a deer and a target, and a deer and a deer and a deer. And I'm like, I only have one deer target. Like I could just sit right here, but I like to get away from my house, you know, like I don't want to be able to see a building when I'm hunting, if at all possible, even though they're so used to us here. They would probably walk up and eat at 20 yards if I was jumping on the trampoline with my kids.
Yeah. And I think with saddle hunting, being where I'm from in central Michigan, I'm sure you've heard of John Eberhart, right?
Oh
yeah. So he's like who I would call like the quote unquote godfather of saddle hunting, right? He's been doing it since the 80s. So I think the Michigan guys sort of had a jump start on that market even before they became popular. And a friend of mine and I were the first two to sort of jump into it. And we really, I mean, we were like disciples of his, right? All the books that he had, we couldn't get enough information, right? And we kind of dove head first into his whole system. And that's what got me started in it. But
I wish I had found out about it. I wish I found out about it years ago. It's funny, Missouri hunters, a lot of them, like in the southeast or the southwest part of the state, I feel like a lot of them are set in their ways. Like nothing's going to change. I'm going to sit in the same stand every year. Like I don't even change straps on it. One day it's just going to like fall out from under them. But I remember early on moving here, I didn't hunt at all aside from waterfowl. Because in Wisconsin, I learned like you don't hunt on public land for rifle season because there are so many people. I'm like, I'm just not doing that. And so I was like, maybe I'll try to find some public land to bow hunt on. And then I found actually a chunk of private, and I'm talking to these guys at work, and they're like, good luck, man. They're like, we haven't seen a deer in 2 years. And I was like, you haven't seen a single deer in 2 years? And they're like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
that's
one
rough.
guy's like, I shot this buck though a few years back. Oh man. And he's showing me pictures, and it's like this basket rack 6-point. And I'm like,
oh man,
he is so pumped about this. I'm like, am I really in that crappy of a spot in the state to where like that is the peak of their hunting career? And then I go out to this private land spot, and I'm like, there's deer everywhere. Like every sit, there's deer all over the place. And I started putting out cameras, getting like 130s, 140s, even a 150 on camera. And I'm like, I've made it. I've made it. I'm never going anywhere.
Yeah. And it was funny when I had that lease in Missouri in 2015. I took a week to go down there. So I took like the 5 days leading up to the gun opener in November. And then I was going to stay for the first 2 days. Oh. And I killed my buck, I think 2 days before the gun opener. And then you get another rifle tag. So I was like, oh, maybe I can double dip, So I hung out. Well, when I was loading my buck, the guy that farmed the property saw me and wheeled in and was talking to me. And he's like, oh boy, you just wait till Saturday. And he's telling me, and he's like, there's going to be so many people out here. There's going to be all these gunshots. And I'm like, oh, really? And I'm like, dang it. And then I got thinking, I'm like, buddy, I'm from Michigan. I don't think you really know what gun pressure is. Yep. And sure enough, Saturday morning, I sat daylight to dark, opening day of gun season on that property, and I heard 8 gunshots all day. 8. I hear 8 gunshots before daylight on my Michigan property. Yep. And I'm not kidding.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. It's like, you don't have to, I tell everyone, I'm like, just don't be the first shot. If you're hunting the first time in Wisconsin, don't be the first shot. Cause you're early then. I'm like, once you hear like 12 shots, you're probably into legal shooting light.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, we had snow on the ground for the gun opener here.
Yep.
I think it was a full 45 minutes before legal shooting hours that I started to hear shots, because people were just silhouette shooting them out in the field,
Oh yeah.
But that's another reason I'm kind of off put by gun season. Like that opening day in Missouri, what I did was I took my bow and I sat in the same tree where I'd killed that buck 2 days before, because I was right in the thick cover anyways. Yep. 30 yards was my max shot. So yeah, it's just kind of off-putting to me. I really like the up close and personal aspect of bow hunting.
Yeah.
Over gun hunting.
Well, it's definitely become my favorite hunting out of everything, is hunting whitetails with a bow. Like I look forward to that way more than rifle season. I would miss all of rifle season if it meant I could just bow hunt the whole time, which here in Missouri, they actually shut bow hunting down during the rifle season now. At least they did last year.
Oh, really?
I was like, that's really
no
odd.
Kidding.
Yeah, like
really.
If you look at the regulations, it has the archery season, which is like September 15th to, I think last year it was November 15th. And then there was a 9-day break, and then it picked back up on like the 24th.
Oh yeah.
Like, this is so weird that you can't even just make me wear blaze orange and I can still go and sit with my bow. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's what we do here in Michigan. As long as you have blaze orange, you're good to go. But I know like Iowa, for the shotgun seasons, there's no archery hunting. That type of thing. So
yeah, that seems weird to me. I've always been a proponent of any method of take that's lesser. So like if it's rifle season, you should be able to muzzleloader hunt and bow hunt during that time. If it's muzzleloader season, you should be able to bow hunt, But I just say, it's not my battle. Like the conservation department, they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Here in Missouri, they've been awesome. Like I've had nothing but good encounters with conservation department. they put so much money back into the habitat and just looking at the crops that they grow specifically for deer. I will say there's probably a lot of upset hunters the other day. I went out to hunt the private property and I drove by this chunk of land. It's all public and it's a couple thousand acres. And it was like right when the temperature dropped, like the pressure was I mean, everything just seemed to line up. And every single parking lot that I went by on the public, it just said closed for special event. And I'm like, oh man.
Really?
Yeah. The whole, like literally the whole, I think it's 3,500 acres. Every bit of it had signs on it that said closed for a special event. So I don't know what they were doing. I saw one guy with a blaze orange vest out there and an orange hat. And he was right at like the headquarters getting into a like a fifth wheel trailer that was parked in the parking lot. And so I was like, I can't even begin to imagine what's going on.
Yeah, that's kind of strange.
So
I did notice that when we hunted Ohio as well. We were in the hill country, like I said, but you get back closer to Columbus and the mixed ag, and those public properties around there, the DNR does a lot of work on with crops and planting CRP type grasses, maintaining those. They look like they do a really good job there as well.
Yeah, I noticed it. The first time I really noticed the amount of work they did was we were out scouting for waterfowl, and it was like a few days before season was going to open. And so we go to this new chunk of land and we walk, because on the aerial map, it was like 500 yards, probably, maybe more, that you had to walk back, but it looked like there was a small body of water. And we start cruising back there and I hear like a machine going. I'm like, what is that? It's just a constant humming of an engine. And we get back and here's a team of guys out there and they're pumping water out of the river to flood this Milo field. And I was like,
really?
Huh, interesting. So we go over and talk to him, and it was Missouri Conservation. And they're like, yeah, we flood this every year. We flood about 40 acres, and there's a strip of trees in the middle for cover. There's a couple pockets on the outside. And they're like, but it creates a good spot for birds to come in and land. Otherwise, they wouldn't come in here, you know? And I was like,
that's awesome.
This is amazing. Like, you guys are doing this in the middle, and it's not even like a well-known area. It's like kind of out in the middle of nowhere, but just another habitat project. So I was pretty impressed with that.
Yeah. At least, you know, your licensed dollars are going to good use there, right?
Oh, for sure. What does this year look like for you? Do you have any, well, first of all, do you run trail cameras?
Yeah, I'm a big trail camera guy. Nice. And last year was the first year that I got into the cellular cameras, and it really made a big difference for me. I picked up 2 of the Tacticam reveals last year that everybody was kind of jumping on. Had great luck with them so far. And it, you know, I didn't exactly know how I wanted to use them at first, but I have really low patience. I have a hard time staying out and not checking cameras. I just have to know, you know what I mean? Especially if I'm not seeing the deer that I think I should be. So I took one of those cell cams, and last year I have a secluded back field on my property. It's about 10 acres, and last year it was standing corn. So there's bedding dead center in the middle of my property along that corn, and I stuck one of those cell cams right over an active scrape right there. And there was a buck that I was after. The buck I ended up killing, I called him the drop tine buck. He had a little 4-inch drop tine at the end of his beam. I had him all summer long on my property, and then once October hit, couldn't find him, and he was skirting the cell cameras, or that's what I came to find out, is he was skirting them. But it got to be like October 10th last fall, and it was really warm that morning. I want to say it was even like 65 at daylight, getting up to 75 during the day. I didn't even hunt that morning.
Yeah.
So at 10:30 in the morning, I get a picture of that deer. And I'm like, 10:30 in the morning, this deer has to be bedding within 100 yards of this camera, you would think, right?
Yeah.
So I got all my gear around, got cleaned up, and at like 1 p.m., I just started sneaking really slow, taking my time, because I'm blessed with a lot of deer on my property, but it makes it very tough to get into without blowing does everywhere, you know? So I started sneaking along the edge of that corn. The wind was good. and I got as far as I felt comfortable, set the tree up, got in there, and about 15 minutes before dark, he made his way up the edge of the corner, and I was able to get him.
That's
and
awesome.
I learned a little bit about that too, because that active scrape, that camera was pointing right at it, right? But that deer was actually, I never would have got his picture that night. He was about 20 yards inside the wood line, and he was going downwind of it. And that kind of opened my eyes a little bit. What I think these bigger bucks do sometimes is they'll check the scrape, but they're not going to go to it to check it. They'll just swing 20 yards downwind and say, okay, no other dominant bucks have been here, I'll just keep cruising, right? And I think that's what he would have done that night. And so the trail cams are, you got to take the good with the bad. You can't just go off that data. And I'm on a deer this year on my property. I was hoping to get him killed before this podcast, actually, but I've seen him 5 different times. I've had 5 encounters in the first 12 days here in Michigan. Dang. And I can't get on him, but he's living right in that same area as last year, but it's beans. And the problem that I have this year is there's so many deer. He'll let like 15 or 20 deer get in that field, and then he comes out. He comes out early, well before dark, but he's got 20 bodyguards, I call them, out in the field. And if any deer gets nervous or anything like that, he's out of there. But what I was getting at with that deer is, if I wasn't seeing him in person, I haven't got a cell cam picture of that deer maybe once since the first 12 days of October. And that deer is living right there. I see him every time I hunt. So you kind of, I don't want that to discourage people if you're not seeing a big buck on your camera. You know what I mean? I'm guilty of it too. Yep. Oh, I don't want to hunt. I don't have a big buck on camera. Well, sometimes they're right under your nose. They're just skirting that camera.
I figured that out pretty quick when I first started hunting this main property. I would sit out there and I'd have deer cruising through, and I'm like, oh, that one, like, I'm going to go and look back at that one on the trail camera, and it's not on the trail camera. I'm like, I would have guessed it walked right by the one down the fence row. And I'm like, where is this deer coming from? And then same with the one last night. I had him on camera with the bachelor group. I mean, I had like 7-8 bucks on camera. They'd all come in at the same time. One would run the other ones off consistently. And I'm just like, man, these bucks are in here every day. I had daylight pictures of them like back in the summer. And I'm like, dude, this is going to be a phenomenal year. The last month, one of my cameras was taking like 2,300 pictures every time I checked it. And it dropped down to where I got like 25 pictures.
Oh, no.
Like, what is going on? Where are these deer? But they just changed up their pattern. Like that big buck last night, it crossed the fence within 5 yards of me. And it's so thick right there. I'm like, these deer want to come out to the edge, scan the field, hop the fence and go. No, he came through the thickest, nastiest stuff and jumped the fence right there. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. So I've kind of decided this year, if I'm going to hunt solely off of game cameras, I better have a game camera on every tree and on both sides of it,
Yeah. I started doing that, actually, putting on opposing sides of the trees just for that. And it's amazing what'll be on one and not the other. But yeah, this buck tonight, I'm actually, after we get off here, I'm going to kind of try and do the same thing as I did last year. I'm going to go in real early tonight. I've got a good wind. Temperatures dropped a little bit here in Michigan. I think the high is only 68 today, and it's been close to 80 for the last 5 days. So Dang. He's a smart buck. He has a bulletproof bed. I mean, he can either see anything coming, or he's surrounded by so many deer. Like, you hear people talk about satellite beds, right? And these deer are kind of fan shaped, bedded around him. And I'm just worried of dominoing all those deer past him. So I don't want to wait too long. I do have a neighbor who's a very good bow hunter in his own right. And I don't want this deer to start cruising for does. And I mean, like 2 years ago, he shot a great 140-inch 10 that I had on camera. And I went and shook his hand. Obviously, I told him, like, man, I'm happy for you, but you broke my heart, man.
Yeah. But
I'm worried that same thing is going to happen this year. So I'm trying to be as aggressive as I can early without blowing it up. That's a little out of character with how I normally would hunt early season. But like I said, I feel like I need to get on him while he's still there.
Yeah. I'm super blessed where I'm at, because on the 4 properties on each side of my main property, out of those 4, I have 1 hunter,
Oh,
and
nice.
he hunts south of me, and it's definitely the best area to hunt around. I mean, it's like miniature bluff country, right? It drops down hard
Yep.
to this river bottom. It's the lowland ag fields with no terrain change, but then they've got like a thick oak ridge line that goes all the way up to the road where the property I hunt starts. But I'm like, man, I kind of have, if I don't mess this up for myself, like there's nobody else taking these deer out except maybe this one bow hunter by himself down on probably 400 acres. And I thought that for years. And then I had this one buck on camera. I called it Big Easy. And he was a perfectly symmetrical 8-point. I mean, just a square frame, super tall tines, like everything he had just screamed awesome deer. And I was like, this is my dream buck right here. Even though he's just an 8-point, like I've never shot anything that looks like him. And I had him on camera, same thing, bachelor groups all summer long, got him hard horned, and then he just disappeared. And I'm like, dang, what's going on? Well, that buck got shot like 3 miles away. And I was like, that's a long ways. But I know exactly what he did, because I know the property he got shot on. He just cruised that river bottom, and he was checking doe bedding areas the whole way down. And I'm like, what's all this crap about bucks have a tiny core range? And, I was getting so mad. And
they do until a certain time on the calendar, and then that goes out the window.
Yep. So we'll
how is your acorn crop where you're at this year?
Phenomenal. It's amazing.
Okay.
Yeah. I get teased every time I leave the house to go hunting and come home, because the neighbors, I've got 2 neighbors, one at the base of the driveway and one like 300 yards up the road. And they both have these beautiful lawns, and it's nothing but oak trees. And every time I pull in or out of my driveway, they're both loaded with deer, because they don't have to dig for them. They can just walk, and it's just like a buffet of mowed grass and open acorns.
It's very thin here in Michigan this year. There's a few red oaks, and I've found virtually 0 white oaks. And I was talking to somebody recently, and they said the gypsy moths are prevalent here the last 2 years, and something about what they do to the white oaks prevents them from producing acorns. But I've definitely seen that. That buck the other night, he comes out into this bean field, and I think they'll feed on the beans, but it's almost more of like a social hub for all the bucks. They'll come there the last hour of light, they'll spar, they'll work scrapes, do that. And then they all kind of work off to this little miniature oak flat of red oaks, and they all sort of end up there. And I haven't had the northwest wind that I need to sit that spot, and I'm getting it Saturday. So
nice.
With a nice cold front. So I'm going to make one strategic play tonight. And then if I don't get him tonight, I'm crashing in on Saturday, right on top of him. So
we might have to do a follow-up episode if you connect with him.
Yeah.
I
was so certain I was going to get this deer killed before the podcast too.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I've told my buddies, I'm like, I'm virtually a wildlife photographer at this point, because this deer has given me hours of the most beautiful scenic footage, full frame, standing on his hind legs in the licking branches. I mean, everything you could dream about. And that first night he came out and did all that, I'm like, I am laying down the most epic episode right now.
Yeah, for real.
And then he just never gets in. But if anything, it'll be a cool story if I can, close the book on him. But it's definitely not a guarantee.
Yeah. When's the last time you saw him? How long ago?
So today's Wednesday. I hunted Saturday evening for him.
Okay.
And I went out very early because we had rain that morning, and in that back field, those deer are so comfortable because it's completely secluded. I'll go out at 3 p.m., which it doesn't get dark here until after 7.
Yeah.
And those deer will be out there 4 hours before dark because they feel so comfortable. And then I end up blowing them out of the field. So I went out at like 1:45, climbed in my tree. And sure enough, the rain moved out, and probably 3:30, I had deer pouring out of the woods. That deer, so I think he's 3.5. He could be 4.5. His body's really filling out, now that he's into the fall.
Yeah.
But he's very smart. And that deer was on the field. He felt comfortable enough at 5:45. So an hour and a half before dark, he was on the field.
Jeez.
And I learned a little bit of a lesson in a hard way. We're very flat here, flat agricultural land, right? So thermals don't really come into play too much.
Yep.
Well, Saturday we had like a 5-mile-an-hour wind. It was the correct wind, but as it got dark, it completely died. And I could just feel that heavy evening air just pulling down.
Mm-hmm.
And my back field is sort of bowl shaped, and the thermals switched and they were sucking right to that field. And like I said, he's got all those deer that come out first. I had 3 does come up the edge and they were downwind. And I do use scent lock and try to be as, scent free as I can. I know it's not 100%, but it helps.
Yeah.
And that doe got to 15 yards and started testing the wind. And I'm like, no, don't do it,
Oh, no.
Well, what I typically see with scent lock is they might do that and then they kind of pace back and forth and then they'll relax, Well, she was getting enough of me that she kept coming and coming. She got right to the base of my tree. I don't know if she smelled where I had touched the sticks or what, but she took off running and she blew 25 deer out of that field.
Oh, no.
He left too. And I just took that opportunity. That was 6:30, about 45 minutes before dark. And I didn't want to get pinned in the tree. So I just left. I snuck out the back door. I'm like, he's gone. He doesn't know what scared that doe.
Yep.
And I left. And sure enough, he gave me a picture an hour after dark. He stayed right there. And on the cell cam, he walked by it. But
well, it's amazing. I've always been like, man, if a deer blows at you or like catches your wind, like it's going to be gone for a week. And over the years, I've just realized one deer can blow and clear a whole field out, but they blow at so many different things. Like even getting them on camera with coyotes coming through, all of a sudden you can see every deer, they're gone. And 15 minutes later, they come right back. And so
that exact thing happened. The third night that I hunted him, I had a coyote. He didn't even chase any deer. He just kind of skirted the field, but a doe saw him and blew at him.
Yep. They
all ran, and exactly what you just said happened. They came right back out, and I'm like, oh, okay, it might be okay. But I've just been pulling my hair out. I really have, because it's almost, I don't know if it's better or worse that I see him every time. You know what I mean? He's right there. I just can't close the deal. And you typically don't get that many opportunities at a good buck like that. Usually you get 1 or 2 and you better make it happen.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like he's pretty comfortable out there. And
that's the other thing that I was just going to say. You just reminded me of it, is even if he got spooked by that doe, his bed is still bulletproof to him.
mm-hmm.
I've not bumped him anywhere close to his bed.
Yep.
So he's never had a negative reaction in that area to feel unsafe. So it sort of makes sense, I guess, that he's staying around, but I don't know. It's like I said, it's very frustrating.
It's funny. I've had multiple conversations this week with guys doing the whole cat and mouse deal with a certain buck right now. And I'm like, I can't believe it. Like, in my mind, we're basically in summer still, and it's actually here. It's been, that it takes forever to actually set in. Like, I'm bow hunting, like it's bow season. And then before you know it, it's over. And you're like, oh
yeah,
no, I miss it.
And I've noticed with young kids too, you're so busy throughout the year that it'll be May, June, and you're like, oh yeah, a few months till hunt, and then bang, it's right there, and you're like, oh man, I got a lot of stuff to get done.
Yeah, I struggled hard on prep this year. I normally like to put a different type of food out for the deer around here, but it's tough because it's like I've got probably 60 acres of soybeans around their bedding area, or on the south and east side of their bedding area. And then on the southwest corner, it's all corn, probably 40 acres of corn. And then their whole bedding area is acorns. I mean, I can't walk down the bean rows to get to my stand without stepping on 2,000 acorns, like all the way down. And I'm like, what's the point? Maybe like some turnips or something for like super late season. But other than that, I just don't have I don't really have anything extra to offer them at this point.
Yeah. Have you planted turnips in the past there?
I haven't.
Or any type of brassica like that?
I was planning on doing it this year, and I had a spot on one corner of the bean field that they had fenced off, and he would keep hay there. Well, a couple of years back, he quit putting hay there, and I was like, hey, can I start putting a food plot in here? I know the deer already come through here. So I planted a food plot last year, but it was kind of a mix of everything. I didn't know what would take because it was kind of on a north hillside. I knew it was going to get some sun in some spots, little sun in other spots. And so I just did this. There's a hardware store here in town, and they make their own blend every year. And so I was like, I'll give it a try. And then this year I was going to do turnips on that, and they pulled the fence down and he planted beans and everything. And so I was like, oh man, I was like, that was going to be the perfect little testing area for it. So.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. I have a couple, I call them neighbors, but they're like 3 miles away. Say they swear by turnips. Their deer will demolish them. I mean, right from late August on, they'll be on them nonstop, and they're in the same mixed agriculture that I am. Yeah. I'll plant turnips. My turnips will get waist high. I'll get, 6-inch turnips on them some years because our soil is good. Yeah. Those deer will not take a bite of them until there's snow on the ground, which could be good late season, but we're not always guaranteed snow, right? And I have an unbelievable amount of deer too. You would think whatever I plant there, they would hammer, right? They'll walk right through those things. Won't touch them until it gets cold. I don't know if it's what do I want to say? Like a family, almost like a family preference, like the certain deer figure out what they are and they pass that on. And these deer just don't know what they are. I don't know, but it's interesting to see just in a couple miles, they prefer different things.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to test out a bunch of different stuff. We'll see. I'm hoping at some point to have my own land, because the land I hunt is still, it's not lease. It's just kind of, we're able to hunt
permission.
It was a permission deal. The guy who owned it passed away. And I was like, well, there goes my hunting land, but then
typically that's what happens.
I thought for sure his sons were going to sell it like right away because they all live out of state. And I called the cattle farmer, because there's a guy who leases it for cattle and crops. He doesn't hunt at all. And I was like, hey, what's going on? Have you heard at all about the property? He's like, they're keeping it. They're keeping it and going to continue to lease it to me for cattle and crops, and nobody hunts it.
Awesome.
And so I called both the sons. I said, hey, what's going on? Is there any way I could? And they're like, oh, absolutely. Yeah. They're like, Dad's let you hunt that for years. We're not taking that from you. And I'm like, yes. But I still don't have full access to like do any improvements or anything like that on it. So
a lot of those families, especially with like the older guy, if you treat them right, that goes a long way.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people that get kicked out of spots and stuff like that, it's because they're not taking care of their landowners like they should be.
Yeah. No, I've gone out there. We've cleaned up. I think we filled 5 trash, like the roadside trash dumpsters with trash. I think it was high school kids. It was right at the end of summer 2 years ago.
No,
and there was just a big fire pit, glass bottles, you name it. It was strung out for 200 yards. So I went out there, actually cleaned that up twice. I was trying to set it up to bust those kids, and never did. And so I talked to the cattle farmer, and he's like, listen, this is what you're going to do if you ever catch them. He's like, have some chains and locks ready and chain them in there, lock the gate so they can't drive out. And I'm like, whoa, you're taking this a whole nother level. Like that might be kidnapping. And he's like, no, we'll settle it. We'll make sure nobody ever comes out there again. I'm like, all right. But we never did catch those guys. I kind of put the word out to anybody who fishes the pond out there. Cause the guy who owned it would let anybody and everyone come out and fish and hunt. And then it got to the point where he was like, hey, I'm giving them your number, you're coordinating everything. And I'm like, sweet. And it had a bunch of people that I caught out there fishing.
I see that with farmers around here that don't hunt. They'll either delegate one of their farm workers or somebody like you, like what you have. I don't even want to mess with it. Just take care of this so it's not even on my radar.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been awesome, and it's a great property. I'll have to send you some aerials of it and get your take on where you'd hunt. The tough part is there's cattle on probably 2/3 of it. And I've noticed it's not that the deer won't go in there. It just depends on how many cows are in there. Like if there's 1 or 2 cows, the deer will still work through. But if the whole, if all 75 cows are in one area, you can forget having a deer come through.
Yeah,
So,
I've seen that as well, whether it be Missouri or Kansas, where I hunted cattle pastures. Where I killed my buck in Kansas last year was pasture, but they were rotated out. They were on the neighboring property. So that worked out well. But from what I've seen, those deer don't like to be overrun with cattle.
yeah. I've watched cows chase deer off in Wisconsin. I was sitting up on a hill and I saw across the valley, there was probably 100 head of cattle. And all of a sudden these three does jumped the fence into the cattle pasture. And it was like a stampede. They did not want them in there. They all ran and the deer took off, hopped a couple fences and were gone. And I was like, dang, those cows are brutal.
Yeah.
Well, hey man, we're over an hour now. That seemed like it flew by.
Yeah, it did.
But I want to give you a chance to share kind of some of your content, where people can find your social media stuff. Because I know you're putting out great stuff. You killed, what was it, six deer on camera last year?
Yeah, I had 2 bucks and 4 does that I was able to take last year. And that was actually like the first year that I had self-filmed, messed around with it a little bit, but not making like a complete usable episode out of it, And last year going in, I said, I'm buckling down. I'm going to do this right. And I was very lucky. It worked out really well for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, especially, it's kind of funny. We laugh because I went to Kansas and I shot a beautiful 9-point out there. And I'm like, oh, this video is going to blow up on YouTube. This is a big buck. It's going to do great. Far and away, our most successful hunt on the channel is a doe hunt from my own property.
Oh, nice.
that just caught on and took off like wildfire. I'm like, man, spent all that money, went out to Kansas, thought I was going to shoot this great buck and make this great video. And people just love the doe hunt from my property. I don't know what it is, but we laugh about that all the time.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what are your channels? What can people go and check out?
So the YouTube channel is myself and a friend of mine, Tyler Wilk. And it's called Split Brow Productions. And across all the social platforms, I think we're on everything but Twitter as Split Brow Productions. We have TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. We're not super and that's actually where I found your podcast, is on TikTok.
Yeah.
And I'm always looking for new podcasts too. I'm an electrician. I own my own business, but I work by myself. So I always have my headphones in at work and I listen to podcasts pretty much all day long. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to check this one out. And then I heard you mention saddle hunting on the one episode. I'm like, oh, I'll reach out and see if he wants to hook up and do one. But yeah, definitely. If anybody wants to find us on YouTube, that's where the bulk of our content is. And also, if I could real quick, like I said, we're working with Latitude Outdoors.
Yep.
Their website, they're based out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and they have, like I said, great ownership. Like if you go to Facebook to any of the groups, like Saddle Hunter Nation is one, any of those saddle hunting groups on Facebook, Kevin Leach and Alex Chop are the 2 owners. They're in there personally. And if there's any issue or anybody making a remark about Latitude, good or bad, they're right on it. I mean, it's pretty rare nowadays to see, the ownership actually taking a proactive role like that.
Oh,
and, when I first reached out to Kevin about working with him, he drove an hour and a half up to my property, brought all the saddles, did a little demo day at my property. We set them up. I mean, they're awesome guys. They really are. So
awesome.
I'd like to send people there to latitudeoutdoors.com.
Yeah, definitely. I'll make sure to put that in the description of the video along with all your social media handles. So
that'd be great. Thanks,
man. I really appreciate you hopping on with me, and we're going to have to hunt sometime. Maybe next time you're coming through Springfield, let me know. If it's during hunting season, I'll bring you out to the property.
Closer to Halloween. I think it's a couple days before Halloween. I'm heading through there, headed to Kansas for a week.
Oh man. Speaking of, I got to share this. I haven't shared this on the podcast at all. So, I had an elk trip planned out to Colorado, and it was an elk, mule deer, and possibly a bear. I just didn't know if I was going to get a bear tag or not. And my wife is on a surrogacy journey, so she's going to have a baby for another couple that can't have one. And based on her cycle and everything, we we didn't know when we were going to have to go to New York, but they were like, hey, the 5th of November, we need you in New York. And I'm like,
oh man. Oh man.
okay. And so what was funny is we planned this elk trip, and it's almost always the last week of October, like almost always. So I'm like, sweet, we can go straight from that to the peak of the rut. We're going to be good. Well, this year, I think opening day is like the 29th, and then it goes till the 7th of November. And so I'm like, I'm about to miss the whitetail rut for possibly shooting an elk. What's going on? So I was already like, okay, you know what? That's a step down for me. And then my wife was like, hey, just a heads up, based on my cycle, we've got to be in New York on the 5th. And I'm like, okay, so I'll just cut my elk trip short. We'll go up to New York, come back here. No big deal. And yesterday we woke up and she's like, hey, babe, I started today. And I was like, that's 5 days ahead of schedule. And she's like, yes, it is. And I'm like, so what does that mean? She's like, well, it means we're probably going to have to go to New York on the 1st. And so I'm like, I'm going to miss all of elk season. But the
so you gain back the whitetail rut.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, so we have to be up there on the 1st, but we're there for a week, but that should still put it, not quite a full week, but that should still put us back here around the 6th or 7th. And so I'm like, oh, that is like prime time. It's the last week before it's the last week before rifle season kicks off here. Normally rifle kicks off like around the middle of the month, around the 15th. And so I'm like, at least I'll still get back out, and yeah, we'll see what happens. None of it's set in stone yet. I don't know for sure that I'm missing elk season. I don't know for sure that I'll be back for the 6th and 7th, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Hopefully you can get some rut hunting in.
I know. I can't wait. I mean, I've started to see a little bit of like pre-rut activity, but you know how much it changes over the next 3 weeks, really. So, well, good luck to you, man. I really do appreciate you hopping on, and I'm going to give you the final word. I call this segment emptying the chamber. Maybe I need to call this like hitting the release for you, since you haven't rifle hunted in so long.
I think we pretty much covered everything, man. Like I said, just check us out on the social platforms, and I do have a really busy fall plan. Like I said, I'm headed west to Kansas on like the 28th of October.
Okay.
And that might end up being a combination Kansas-Oklahoma hunt if I tag out early in Kansas.
That's cool.
Then I'm headed back to Michigan for November, and then I did draw Iowa. So Iowa muzzleloader between Christmas and New Year is the plan right now. So could be a banner year. Maybe I can finally catch up to this buck that's handing my butt to me here in Michigan too. So if everybody wants to follow along on YouTube, hopefully I can lay down some good footage this fall too.
Yeah, I'll be following along for sure. Have you put any footage out yet of the buck you're chasing in Michigan?
I haven't.
It's all going to go into the episode.
I typically play it pretty close. I typically play it pretty close to the vest on social media until I get the deer on the ground. Just because there are so many hunters in Michigan, you know what I mean?
Yep. Someone's going to track down that property.
If I make it through the season and I don't get him killed, I have so much quality footage that I'll probably have to make an episode anyways, even if somebody else kills him.
Yep.
But he's far and away the most photogenic deer that I've ever had. He's not shy about getting filmed. So I'm really hoping I can do that, because like I said, it's going to be an epic episode if I can do it. So
that's awesome, man. Well, good luck. Hopefully over these next couple of days, when you hit that cold front, you can catch up with him.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks. Good luck to you too.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.